Good day, folks. This is Greg Judy at Green Pastures Farm. Today I'm joined by my lovely bride, Jan. And we've got a bunch of miscellaneous questions that Jan has put together. We're starting to do several of these videos because we get constantly asked. There's a lot of great comments, and I just want to say thank you all for being such loyal subscribers. We're right at 60,000. We're closing in on 60,000. And wanted to give a shout out to Coach Dana. He did a 1 hour deal the other day. I'm going to have that on our website, so go to that and watch that linking.
And what's the website?
GreenPasturesFarm.net. We did a live presentation for about an hour, and Dana, he's a coach. He actually is does a lot of work with the New York Yankees, and he's a really passionate guy for what he does. And Dana's one of our YouTubers, and I was just blown away with that. But he's bought a farm in New York, and he had some great questions, and we had a great discussion. And he's got that now. There's a link, and I'm going to post that on our website. So watch for that too. But today, Jan's got some questions she wants to fire at me. So
this is kind of like management, miscellaneous questions. So here we go. So when we do the cattle moves, how much do we give on a move? How do you figure that?
Oh yeah, so on that's a great question, by the way. Whoever submitted that one.
Yeah.
So how big an area do you give your cows? Some of y'all just starting out. You know, you may have, let's say, 10 acres, and you've got 3 or 4 or 5 cows, whatever.
Or sheep.
Or sheep.
Is for any.
How big of an area do you give them? It all depends on your rainfall and where you live and how often you can come back to those plants. And so if you're getting good, adequate rain, you can come back around a lot quicker than you can if you don't get any rain. So to give you an example, in Arizona and New Mexico, some of those areas out there, it's so bad in parts of New Mexico, you may only graze your farm once every 2 years. That's how brittle it is. I mean, they're just
what's brittle?
Brittle 4 to 6 inches rainfall, or hardly any rainfall. Things aren't happening very quickly. Okay, you can lay a piece of wood on the ground and it'll be there for 70, 80 years. It doesn't rot. Nothing will eat it. There's just no biology happening in that environment. But when you get rain, it will explode. So here in Missouri, to give you an example, we're in the 38 to 40 inch rainfall area. In the springtime, we're going to move our animals on bigger areas. We're going to give them a bigger area. And why are we doing that? It's because we need to go around our farm quickly because our plants are growing quickly. So your purpose as a grazer is to try and keep the seed head from forming on your plants. Too many of them, if you get a lot of seed heads out there, that sends a signal out to the plant to quit putting green leaves on. What's the sole purpose of a grass plant in its life?
Well, just anybody is reproduce.
Reproduce. And so what happens to a grass plant when it gets stressed? In other words, you graze it too short. What happens to it? It puts on a seed head. It's trying to survive. So don't chop the baby
too short. It tries to tiller.
Well, you don't want to come back too soon. That's what it's all about. And if you're going to come back too soon, you're not going to have a solar collector. And it's all about collecting solar energy. The longer the leaf, the more solar energy you can collect.
And does it change over the season?
Absolutely. So that first grazing cycle around your farm, I'm going to give you an example for us because that's what we have to go by. It's going to be 20 to 28 days all the way around our farm.
And how many acres is that?
1,620 acres total. 800 acres roughly of grass, 750 to 800.
So moving fast.
We're moving fast. We're moving morning and night, getting around that farm. And you just can't hardly go fast enough because grass doesn't wait on anybody. It just goes. So now we're into June. Maybe it's getting hotter. It definitely is. The rains aren't quite as often. And so your plants are starting to slow down just a little bit. So you need to lengthen that out. So now you're looking at maybe 40 to 45 days on your next rotation. And we've went as much as 180 to 200 days in a really bad drought where we got zero rain from spring clear up until the end of August. Zero rain. You need to lengthen that time out. What else should you be doing if it's not raining?
Culling.
Calling.
And what's culling?
Calling, getting rid of your inferior animals or the animals that can't reproduce. If you got a bunch of steers out there, get rid of them. They cannot reproduce. You're trying to survive. That's what you're trying to do because you don't know when the next rain's going to come. And I get to people say, well, I had to feed too much hay this year because we didn't get any rain. If you didn't get any rain, you should have had a drought plan. And that drought plan is if you don't get a rain by a certain date, you're not growing any grass back, you need to sell 10, 15, 20% of your herd. Get rid of them. You're trying to preserve the very best and keep those intact.
Well, let's give an example. In
2012, yep.
That was a heartbreaking year for us. So
it was one of our most profitable years ever.
Most profitable but heartbreaking. No rain. This is the year.
It was tough.
And Greg comes in and he says, I'm selling the 2-year-old steers.
Sold everything. Even sold the yearlings.
Yeah, and he
sold all the steers. Anything as a steer.
And I'm screaming no because I've just developed a really to consumer market. So if you sell those steers, those 2-year-old steers and the 1-year-olds, that's 4 years before for me to develop any kind of market again, because I have nothing to sell to anybody. But you found people who would buy pot loads, and like he said, it was most profitable, and we sold the cattle before other people started selling the cattle.
Got a good price. Yep.
And it got so bad that people were taking in August their cattle to be sold because they were out of water, grass, hay, and because
cows were thin.
And the sale barns were saying, take them home. We have too many to sell and not enough buyers.
That's called lack of planning. You didn't have a drought plan. Folks, don't be married to your cattle or your sheep. And I really got the wrath from Jan that summer.
Yes.
She's like, what am I going to sell for beef next year? I said, honey, there won't be a next year if we don't get rid of these steers. Because we're not going to be able to keep our cows. I was focused on the cow herd, and that's what we saved. We saved our cow herd. We kept the best bulls. Everything else was sold.
It was about every 10 days something was going.
Yep. And so what happened? Well, I'll tell you what happened. It didn't rain. And it didn't rain all summer long. And by the end of August, Hurricane Isaac came up from the south, the Gulf, and dropped 9 inches of rain on us in about 4 to 5 days. We grew a ton of fall grass that fall. Everybody else, their pastures were about that tall, about half an inch tall.
And there was no hay to be had.
They didn't grow any grass. You know why? Because they overgrazed their whole farm. We didn't. We sold the animals early, okay? We had a nice residual to catch all that rain. And when it did rain, folks, it was like overnight. Those plants took off, regreened, and we had grass that tall in it was crazy. Well, 7 to 10 days.
Yeah, and I mean, it was so bad. The trees had lost their leaves. We got the rain. The trees re-leafed and flowered. That's how crazy. But the thing is, when winter came, there was no hay to be had.
Mm-mm.
And we had stockpile.
We had plenty of stockpile. We kept our best cows. Yeah. We had our very best cows. We kept them intact along with 3 really nice bulls. So looking back, I'm telling you folks, watch your rainfall. How did I know when to sell? I'll tell you when I knew when to sell. I went back and looked 30 days earlier where I had been. Guess what? Those plants had not grown 1/8 of an inch. There was no regrowth. When you have no regrowth in the spring flush, you're in trouble. You need to get rid of some animals, and you better do it quick. Because the more animals you keep on your farm, they're eating the grass that your good ones could be eating in a drought. That's what you're trying to do, is preserve your best animals. So get rid of those males. They can't give you a calf. You need a couple to breed your cows, but you don't need 20 or 30 of them. Sell them. Get rid of them. Keep those good cows and heifers.
Then we start going through the cows.
Yep. So, yeah, it was just we had a plan. I stuck to it, and it was one of the most profitable years we ever had. And our cow herd got better.
Yeah, yeah. and we had people in other areas that were getting so much rain they didn't have enough cattle.
Yeah, so we sold them to them.
And we hit the top of the market.
Yep. So it's all about having a drought plan. Don't wait for the drought to have that. You should always have at least the bottom 15% of your cows already picked out. Which are the bottom 15% that need to go? And those are going to be cows that may be a little bit older, have a rough hair coat. One got limpy, like a fescue foot. You know, every year she gets a little limp or something, or she's got a big teat when she calves. The calf has trouble sucking, whatever. You know which ones are the bottom 15%. Those are the ones you sell. And keep your really nice cows.
And you need to monitor.
Got to monitor. You got to monitor the growing conditions all the time. Yep.
Okay, so now we're into winter. How much hay do you know to feed, and when do you feed it?
Yeah, so how much hay do you know? First of all, it really helps to go out, you know, in early fall. I'm talking like when the stockpile's grown. So we'll grow all of our stockpile pretty much by the end of September. October is killing frost. We're not going to grow much stockpile. So I know how many days of grazing I have before winter ever gets here. And so I can go out there and calculate how many animal days of grazing I have just by measuring the inches of forage that I have on an acre of grass. Okay? A cow eats 30 pounds, roughly. 1,000-pound cow will eat 30 pounds of forage a day. 1,500-pound cow, that's 45 pounds. Did y'all hear that? That's 15 more pounds a day. That's huge. On 100 head, that's a lot more forage. So anyway, calculate how much they eat per day, how many cows you've got. You can calculate how many animal days you have out there. And that'll give you a rough idea how deep into the winter that you can graze without having to feed hay. Then you know exactly how much hay you're going to need. We typically will feed about a bale to a bale and a half per cow for the whole winter. That's what but we're still grazing. February 12th?
No.
13th.
Yeah, 13th.
Folks, we gave them stockpile this morning. It's 15 below zero out there. We unrolled one bale. They left it. They didn't graze it. They went running to the stockpile. The whole herd dead. Folks, your stockpile is worth a fortune. Learn to grow it. Learn to ration it out. If you are fortunate enough to grow it, don't give them the whole field. Ration it out. Start at your water source and keep moving. Temporary fence. We can talk more about that too.
Yeah. And so sometimes we do this exercise at our schools because it's, especially in the fall, we have 4 people go out there and we stand X amount apart and say, we look at our forage and say, is that enough for one cow for one day?
Yep. So you can do that. Those exercises, they talk about them and they describe how to do that in the Holistic Management Handbook. I don't want to get into all that. It takes a lot of time.
But there is a place where you can go and get this information.
Yep.
Okay. Can you feed hay on 2 feet of snow? This was from somebody up in Wisconsin.
Yes, you can. It really helps to have a tractor with a blade. In 2018, we got hit 24 inches of snow, and the cow herd was 3 miles from the house at a farm, and luckily we had hay, and but we couldn't get to the cows. We do have a 4-wheel drive tractor now. I've had that for about 4 years. Put the blade on it. I had an 8-foot blade. I bladed a path down a blacktop. The state didn't even open up the roads. They were trying to keep everybody going in town. They don't come to the country. Got a lane all the way to the cows, and I just started blading windrows out in my pasture where the cows were at. Long windrows. I windrowed the whole field. So I put windrows about every 8 feet all the way across this 20-acre field. And in those windrows, that's where I went in and unrolled my hay. So I was still able to feed hay, unroll it, get the nutrients out on the pasture in 24 inches of snow. You can't unroll hay on snow that's 2 foot deep, because what happens is the snow builds up in front of that bale and it won't let it turn. It won't unroll. So, but you get that hay, you get that snow off of there, you can unroll it and you can get all that nutrients, all the pee, all the poo out there where you'll grow some more grass. You don't need to have a sacrifice area.
Oh, that's what I was going to say, because the next part of that question was, instead of doing that, instead of feeding hay, should you just do a sacrifice area? And
Well, let me clarify something. If I had 14 to 1,500 pound cows, I would have a sacrifice area because those cows will destroy your farm. We've got areas on our farm where we used to run those big cows for people, and they'd go down that deep. And Jan can verify it. We trashed her farm.
Yes. It
And,
was sad.
It was sad what it did to that farm. And there's parts of that farm today that you can still see it. But those big cows went down like that. And they just turned the whole farm to a muddy slur.
Yeah.
There wasn't any sod left. It was just a slur. It looked like a pig lot. And
they're going up to mud up
yes,
to here. It was horrible.
We had lanes back to the water tank, and that lane, you couldn't have taken a root plow and destroyed that lane any worse than those cows did. And it just rained, and it wouldn't stop raining. Now fast forward to today, we've got 900,000 pound cows. We still get the same rains, but we don't destroy our farms anymore. And we don't have a sacrifice paddock. We don't have a sacrifice paddock anywhere on our farm. We don't need one because we got the smaller frame cows, smaller as far as weight. They're not going to go down that deep in a rainstorm. They're going to go down about that deep. That's not an issue. It's an issue when they go down 8 to 12 inches. You just destroyed your farm. So if you got the bigger cows, get you a sacrifice paddock, get you some hay where you can get it in there, and you better have a four-wheel drive tractor because you're going to need it to get the hay into that mud lot. So
yeah.
And there's another reason, folks. I hate sacrifice lots, and that's because of the mud that you get frozen on the skin of your animals. When an animal gets mud frozen on their legs and their belly and their back because they lay down in that stuff, and it freezes on them, oh my goodness, you're asking for a cow to get sick.
Especially the calves.
The calves. They can't stay warm. They're going to eat more. They're going to require more forage and hay to stay warm because you've taken away the insulation factor. You go out and get your skin all wet and froze to you, you're not going to be able to stay warm. That's what happens to a cow when they get mud frozen on them.
And since we're going around that, the next question is, do we have shelters, and what do we do with the cattle in bad weather like we're going to be getting tonight?
Yeah, so we moved the cows last night, went in there to move them last night, and they were all down against the creek. They'd found a low spot in that paddock, and that's where they were at. They were all packed in there. And that's one of the beautiful things about cows is they do have a big rumen tank. There's a lot of water being heated in that rumen tank. They drink a lot of water in the wintertime, more than a sheep. A sheep won't drink any water, as long as they're grazing. But the cattle all use this ball of flesh, and they're always churning. There's ones coming to the middle, and one kind of gets pushed out, and then he works his way back in. And they'll always put their butt to the wind, and they'll get down in the warmest spot in that paddock, and that's where you'll find them. And if you unroll a bale, they can lay down on some hay. If you got snow out there, that helps a lot too. But they'll find a cedar tree. If you give them a cedar tree grove, that's where they'll be.
And that's why we don't like cedars, but we always leave cedar trees out there.
Yeah.
And then we're going to finish up with this last question. So it's summertime. Do we have shade? Why? And is shade important?
Yeah, is shade an issue for cattle? It depends on the cattle. If you've got a solid black herd and they've got a little bit of hair on them, they're going to be miserable if you don't give them some kind of shade, especially when you hit 90 to 95 degrees. Those cows can actually get hot enough that they'll abort their calves. Had it happen. We were custom grazing some black cows. And, of course, the South Pole that we run are red-hided. And a red-hided animal is a lot cooler than a black-hided animal. They did surface thermometers on the top backs of the animals. It was this test was done in Gillette, Wyoming. And I think the ambient temperature that day was like 102. The red-hided animal was 107. The black-hided one was 132. That's why you see cattle, especially black ones, in ponds. In the summertime, they're trying to stay cool, and it's not a good thing. I mean, so we went with red for that purpose. So do they need shade? When it gets up to 90 degrees and the humidity is 100%,
and no clouds,
no breeze, no clouds, 100% humidity, I like to make sure they have a tree somewhere, because if you can keep your animals comfortable, they're going to do better. They're going to gain for you. If they're extremely hot, and where you really get into trouble, folks, is at night. when it doesn't get below 85. In other words, just staying in the 80s at night, 85, 88, that cow's guts, the internal organs don't get a chance to cool down. She starts the next day at elevated temperature, 85, 88 degrees in her gut. That's tremendous heat stress on an animal. So make sure that they have some shade. I mean, it's just a good stockmanship, I think. There's people that say, oh, they don't need it. Maybe they don't, but...
Well, we in the beginning, we were running other people's cattle. We had the salt and pepper herd.
Yeah, salt and pepper herd. So they were a Charolais mixed with, and there was black Angus cows in with the Charolais. Somebody came down the driveway and said, that's an awful nice looking Charolais herd you have out there. I'm like, well, there's some black ones out there too. He said, no, there's not. I'm like, what do you mean? And this was 150 cows. There was about 75 of each. Sure enough, walked out there wasn't a single black cow grazing. Every Charolais was out there grazing.
The black cows are in the shade, trying to cool off.
Yeah, so it does make a difference. You know, if you live where heat's not an issue, then black's fine. You know, but if you get where there's a lot of sun, you know, especially down south, that's gonna be a pretty miserable animal.
Yeah. So I think with that, keep submitting your questions. We will try to keep better tabs and try to do this a little more often.
Yeah. Thank you, honey.
Okay.
For the questions. Thank you all for being such loyal subscribers. Appreciate everyone. The new ones to the channel, hit that subscribe button on the way out and that like button. And we're going to see y'all on down the road.